Now, Amber, would you like to just start talking a little bit about just what's been happening with the white jacket effect and welcome people, and let's get this show rolling.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to welcome our panel guests. Peter Gilmore, you're the executive chef of Key Restaurant and Benelong. Don't really need a mention, but you're an absolute master of food inspired by nature and a passionate gardener. So
I am.
Welcome.
Yeah.
How have you been during this strange time where we've had to stay at home, and how did your restaurant and staff react to the sudden changes?
Oh, my printer machine's just about going off. Sorry. I'll see if I can turn it off. All right. Okay. Sorry about the noise. Yeah, look, it's certainly been very different, and it's sort of, 7 or 8 weeks now since the restaurant closed down. It's been a bit of an adjustment period, I think, and certainly for all of us in hospitality. Looking forward to the possibility of actually being able to get back out there and maybe start the restaurant up at some point soon. So just keeping trying to keep positive for that period, and trying to make the most of this downtime to do other stuff and read and research and do some experiments. And, so it's certainly been different.
Yeah, it has been. So I'd like to also welcome Tawnya Bahr, chef, educator, food consultant, founding partner of your regional tour company, Straight to the Source. Tawnya, since I've met you, I've come to realize that your passion for the industry is absolutely immense. It's a pleasure to have you on the panel today. How have you been affected by COVID-19?
Oh, well, thanks, Amber. It's great to be here. So I wear a few hats, so I know where to begin. But I guess for me, in the early learning center space, because we're an essential business, we have 150 customers, little ones, down in Kirrawee. We've been on edge going, are we going to be closed down, or are we going to stay open? Ordering, managing the staff and all of that, going from 150 down to 50 kids and then back up to 80 the next day. So it's been a roller coaster ride from a chefing perspective. And then a consulting, it's ebbs and flows. And so I lost a lot of work, and now I'm picking some other work up, doing a variety of things I've never done before. So that's been interesting. And then with Straight to the Source with my business partner, Lucy Allen, the whole preface of that business is to curate regional tours, to take chefs, give them opportunities, to go out and have this educational, amazing behind the scenes experience all over the country. And we basically have been cut off at the knees. So, it's been a very emotional roller coaster, both financially and emotionally, I think, for the last 8 weeks for me. I'm trying to extract all the goodness, though. Yeah.
Yes, there's definitely been good things coming out of it, silver lining everywhere. I've been hearing a lot of people taking advantage of the time and supporting one another.
Yeah, well, my son's doing his HSC, so I've never been home so much in my life, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So yeah,
excellent. Well, also James Kidman, I'd like to welcome you, legend of the hospitality industry, fantastic knowledge and culinary technique. Also a very good friend. We shared Richard Moiser as our mentor, and I'm sure that you'll agree that we miss him very much.
Yeah, look, I miss Richard very, very much. I was actually only talking about him yesterday. Obviously, a man who took his own life about a year ago, unfortunately, but a person who I, just had a wonderful influence on my life. He was my first chef. He was a man that I always would ring and say, look, you know, I'm thinking about going for this job. What do you think? Always came in and supported me at whatever restaurant that I worked in, whether I was a head chef or a commie or a demi or an apprentice or whatever the scenario. He was a really top mate. And I miss the gossips that we would have over, you know, an hour or so on the phone, which was always great fun because he'd moved up to Queensland. But I was actually just recently having a pretty good gossip with his wife, which was nice. She's continued on that legacy of his for me, so that's very good. Yeah.
Lovely. And how have you been coping with this strange time lately?
Look, I've actually been okay. I mean, I think being busy has been the catchphrase for me. I think certainly, in a way, closing the restaurant, whilst it was really emotional and was almost a bit easier because you didn't, in those last couple of weeks, you had situations where you had to decide whether or not you were going to keep a staff member or not. You know, people had only been with you maybe for short spaces of time. And you were sort of worrying about how you were going to roster the kitchen and everybody's emotions and you know, you could see that tension in people, and so just to sort of shut down actually almost was a bit of a relief in some respects, not only for myself but I think staff as well. People just didn't have to worry as much, and then there were sort of other measures that obviously sort of took a little bit of the sting out of the tail, obviously for some employees, which was things like JobKeeper, etc. But obviously there was a bunch of people who weren't looked after, which was some of our visa people, which was which has been disappointing. But look, I've been in contact with everybody during this period of time in my kitchen, and you know, the great bulk of them have really been doing well. I've had one or two people have been a bit anxious about various things, but for the most part, I think everybody's been really positive, and in some respects, I think some people have really enjoyed the break as well, because we work really hard, let's face it. So it's been a good time to catch up with family and pause for a moment.
Yeah. I agree with that. We do work very hard, so I've heard it a lot that people are enjoying having a rest.
The money will run out very soon, unfortunately. But in the meantime, I'm not moving a lot. I'm not going very far, and so it stretches out a long way, unfortunately. So.
Well, welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
I'll just tell you a little bit of background about myself and the white jacket effect. I'm a chef, and I've been in the industry for about 18 years. I began my training with Peter Gilmore at Key, and it was the best foundation that I could have had for my career as a chef. I fell in love with the kitchen. I fell in love with the fast pace and the perfectionism, the camaraderie. And I knew that that's really what I wanted to do for my career. Soon after I qualified, I went over to London, as you do, to get a bollocking. My friends at the time said that I wouldn't be able to handle it, so that gave me even more momentum to prove them wrong. And I got a job in a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant in Mayfair in London, and my friends were right. It was tough. It was tough. I remember one time quite vividly. I finished work. It was 1 in the morning, which was normal. And I was living at a share house. I lived about an hour away from the restaurant. And when I got home, I was setting my alarm, and I realized I only had 3.5 hours of sleep until I had to get back and do it all over again. And it's probably not a very nice thing to say, but I remember thinking to myself, should I have half an hour sleep more, or should I have a shower? And I opted for the shower because the days are pretty long. And it was winter, so it was cold, and our hot water didn't work very well. So yeah, that was pretty miserable getting up that morning. And I ran down the road, and just as I turned the corner, I saw the bus leaving off into the distance. And I was devastated. I knew that I was going to be late for work. So
that makes Key sound like a picnic, Amber.
Well, at least it was sunny going on the ferry to work. This was a bit colder and snowy. I got to work 10 minutes late, and one of the rules was that you buy a case of beer for the kitchen staff to drink at the end of the night if you're late. And I went through lunch service, packed down, started to get ready for dinner service, and that would have been my opportunity to go and get the case of beer. But I just knew that if I left, I wouldn't be set for service. So I made the decision. I stayed and got boxed off and had a good service. And at the end of the night, I was expecting something bad. The sous chef came up to me and he said, "You didn't get us a case of beer, so you're going to have to scrub all the walls of the kitchen before you go home." And I thought, great. So I did. But to make it even worse, he went across the road and he bought everyone pints of beer, and they sat on the kitchen benches drinking their beers, watching me scrub the walls. So yeah, it was tough.
Pretty toxic culture, isn't it? It's a very, very different sort of culture over, well, it used to be over in the UK.
Yeah, well, I didn't know it at the time, but looking back on it now, I was dealing with the stresses and the pressure and the bullying, I suppose, with drinking, and that's just how I coped. I left that job and I went and got another job in Surrey, which was way different. It was with Michael Wicknell, and he ran his kitchen much differently. It was like my family away from home. It was creative and inspiring, and I had such a lovely time there. I stayed there for 2 years. But all along, I had this coping mechanism to deal with the long hours and the stress involved with the industry, and that was sort of ingrained in me by then. And I started to see it affecting other areas of my life. I started to have problems with relationships and my health. Unfortunately, this isn't an uncommon story. There's a lot of this ingrained in our culture, and it's sort of, you have to have that push-on mentality to be looked upon as tough. And unfortunately, many people suffer in silence. So it's not just drinking, it's drugs, cigarettes, being unfriendly to your body, not eating healthily, sometimes even self-harm. And that's really, really just so sad. My chef mentor, as we were talking before, and best friend, he was dealing with all of these things. And the only way that he saw to be free was to take his own life. And when this happened, I just felt so powerless. I really didn't know how to help him, and I didn't know what to do. So that's when I created the White Jacket Effect. So in honor of Rich, who is the funniest, most generous and loving and creative man, I'm making a stand to have a shift in the culture and the way that we work and live together. And on that note, I'd like to introduce Sam McLennan, who's the author of our powerful new course, Get Fresh.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you. And yeah, it's I've got quite a very varied and broad background. My parents had a cafe. It was called the Flying Teapot Cafe and Gardens, and I used to work in the restaurant there. And because it was my parents running it, you know, they'd treat me the same as what they'd always treat me. But when I worked in other restaurants around the globe, and I worked on super yachts as well, I learned that was a little bit different. But also I learned a lot when I was in the Army, in the Australian Army. There was a lot of discipline there, and there was that age-old tradition of you've got to be tough and you've got to keep on fighting to the very end. And what I can see is it's very similar as to what's in the hospitality industry. We've got people that there's some very old traditions that are being handed on down through generations, and now we're starting to realise that those traditions and those traditional ways of being and thinking and speaking are having a huge impact on people today. You know, people are using substances, drugs, alcohol, self-harming, and harming others, either verbally or physically, to get out that emotion that they just don't know how to deal with. And I saw a lot of it when I was working in child protection as well. I saw children that had been, you know, harmed by their parents and just were no longer able to be handled by their parents. And there was some people in there that just they didn't know, you know, what were more powerful ways to think and to speak from, because they'd been trained by their parents. And you know, I learned a massive amount by living with those children. And what I really see is, you know, how I still had childhood behaviours within me, even though I'm 43 years old now. You know, I started my own businesses, and you know, sold my own business. Now I help a number of other people grow their businesses. And what I see is really life is just a communication exercise. And it's how we speak, and it's how we think, and it's how we listen. And a lot of the foundational lessons that we've got in here are all about shifting the way in which we speak and listen so that we can get a different result, and we can deal with those emotions that are caught within our bodies from the day that we've just had, or the week we've just had, or the year we've just had, or maybe the childhood that we just had. And, you know, I often see adults behaving like children, and I used to behave like a child myself. You know, I just hadn't dealt with the issues that I needed to deal with. And it's something that we can all do. We can all deal with these issues. And what we do is we create a safe space where nobody is wrong, nobody's right. It's just a safe space to be how you need to be. And so this lesson that we're going to go through today is one of those foundations that is really powerful. It can be a powerful new foundation for the hospitality industry, and you know, I look forward to presenting it.
I think what's interesting is that, I had some fabulous chefs who I worked for, who had immense talent, But I think, you know, when you work for people who are also sort of tyrannical in the way that they operate, you know, due to, you know, tiredness and, you know, long shifts and just constant pressure and the exhaustion, what happens is that these people become your role models. And then, you know, when you step into you know their shoes in you know, when you take up your first, or at least when I took up my first sort of head chef role, you know, there was a good portion of me that was still very much, you know, the person who I believe I am, which is a nice-natured, you know, kind and you know, person. But then there's this other portion of you that, you know, has been affected by, you know, these other situations, which are, you know, really, really intense, you know, and that's not just the intensity of service or pushing to get a function over the line, but it's an intensity of someone who, you know, who has been affected by someone who is just tired and, you know, and exhausted. And, you know, it's taken me a very, very long time to sort of get rid of most of that person out of my own sort of management. And I dare say it probably took me the first 6 years or so of being a head chef to really kind of relinquish a lot of that experience. And then subsequently, when I moved into a couple of other positions, I've sort of been able to sort of take a certain step back where I haven't needed to be that individual, and nor would I really want to be. And that's not to say that sometimes you don't have to have a strict sort of face or what have you. But it's, you know, really, you know, the more and more you can get rid of those sort of almost stereotypes of our industry, you know, the better. When you've got people who are your role models and who are calm, who are you know, focused, who know how to manage, you have a much better sort of situation of people who are going to go in turn and be better professionals and be more professional in their own sort of setups. And, you know, I think one of the things, and so I don't mean to hog any of this, one of the things that when we first met, which really resonated with me and has continued to resonate with me, this is something that Peter said when we were having lunch that day at the launch of the White Jacket Effect, was that, Peter, you know, you said that one of the important things was to be able to give your staff this sense of I suppose, respect for what they're doing. And you sort of empowering them to really enjoy what they're putting on a plate, and so that when you walked away from the kitchen, you know, they were going to, you know, or the ownership of it was your word, was that they owned up to that work. And, you know, that was really resonated with me, and that, you know, when you walk away from your own kitchen, you want people to have as much ownership over a dish as you do, whether that be a side salad or an entree main, whatever the situation is.
Yeah, James. Look, mate, I've always found I get a lot more out of people with a positive approach rather than the sort of tyrannical sort of fear approach, you know. And I think in the old days there was a lot of chefs that learned from their chefs that you had to run a kitchen like the military. And, you know, I just always didn't think that was actually true, because I saw it actually, in a lot of ways, was more negative and more counterproductive, you know, losing staff and having your staff too scared to come up and ask how to do something properly. You know, I mean, for me, it was more about sort of wanting to instill that sense of professionalism, care and pride in what you're doing. You know, and I've always found that, you know, there's different approaches, and I've always found that, you know, sort of actually motivating someone to do well, and through acknowledgement and through, you know, positive reinforcement. I mean, it's not to say that our kitchen isn't a reasonably strict kitchen, because there is a level of discipline that you have to have operating in this industry, but it doesn't have to be negative. It can be positive, and, you know, and I do think the industry is starting to change and come around to that way of thinking. And I also think we've had to, you know, we've had to look at things like how many hours we work. We've had to look at how you treat people. At this day and age, you can't get away with that bullshit that people used to get away with before. I don't believe.
Absolutely.
And there was a beautiful thing that you said there, Peter, and it's about that you can, if you choose to, be a prick and an arsehole. Or you can choose to be just loving and generous and accepting. And one thing that we talk about a lot in the White Jacket is that the number of different perceptions that you can have of someone or how to take the next steps or what to say, the number of different possibilities that you have in front of you is the same number of grains of sand on a beach. There's thousands. There's thousands of different ways that you can move forward or you can look at something. But what I see is that, and I know when I've had a reaction in the past, I've been stuck on a certain perspective. And that perspective has caused me to react. My body's got tight. I've got angry. I've got, frustrated. I've got sad. I've got depressed. And it's all because I got stuck on one of those perspectives. But what we know is that quite quickly you'll see whether or not that perspective is working for you. You'll feel it. So just give it up and choose another perspective. Choose something that empowers people to be the best that they can be.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you've got to, I think the other thing as well is that, I think the industry has sort of turned, some sort of corner, especially in professionalism. I think, you do see, it far more as a career. I think that, people take their jobs very seriously. And, the industry has moved in a way and the amount of hours that people are doing are normal, the normal hours that normal people would work. And there isn't this sort of, expectation that you have to, work 60 hours a week and only be paid for, 38 hours of work. I mean, compliance is a big thing. And, if you're not having to, work people over the coals and they get to the end of the week and they're looking for some sort of, release, which is, potentially at the pub, on the dance floor at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever the scenario is, then, people are going home, they're able to enjoy their lives and interact with their partners in a normal way and get on with things.
I think over the last couple of years, we have found a better balance. Look, I think for a long time, and I think everyone was guilty of it, and it's how you're being brought up as a chef. You're expected to do those extra hours because you saw it as your career, as a vocation, as something that, chefs work long hours. It was just accepted. And, I think that we've all been forced to re-examine that with compliance and other issues. And, we certainly made moves to reduce hours quite a few years ago. But, now the situation is probably better than it's ever been for chefs. And it is very different, with compliance and working, sort of more into regular hours. It has been a lot of adjustments for our industry as well. But, I think I can see it as a positive thing too. But the reality is that a lot of my chefs will all go and take second jobs and still work long hours because they want to earn more money or they just have that extra energy, but at least the choice is there now where it wasn't there before. So, the industry is improving, but I think the big thing is just the way people are being treated now is a lot more positive than it, say, used to be 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
Right. Wonderful. Were you about to say something there, James?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think also, what is becoming more and more evident is that, your career path as a chef does look more promising. I mean, if your career path is looking like, you're going to go from working, 55 to 65 hours a week, and then when you become a head chef or sous chef, you're going to be working slightly more than that. And you know, as you're progressing, life is actually going to get sort of more tiring and harder. You know, the sort of desire to sort of continue on in the industry is going to the interest levels are going to wane very, very quickly. And the other thing that I think, you know, I see today in terms of these, you know, the hours and the positive sort of reaction to that is that, you know, I think people, you know, they tend to pick up things a little bit quicker. You know, I see the progression through the kitchen as being one that sort of, you know, people are fresh, they're active, their minds are in a good place. And if you want to teach someone this, you know, when you're teaching someone technique, they tend to pick up concepts a whole lot quicker because they're fresher, they're active, they sort of react to those things.
Yeah, there's a lot of positive stuff to come out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, completely.
So, that's correct. Okay, wonderful. So thanks very much for really starting to share some deeper insights into the industry. And one of those things that I picked up, I think it was Peter or James talked about, you know, not sort of going into the pub anymore and having the late nights and actually being able to go home and have more of a balanced life and going home a little bit more fresh rather than going home to the pub. Well, maybe the pub is home for some people, but going to the pub where you can actually drink a bit more and release some of those pressures, but you instead choose to go home and spend more time with your loved ones or with your friends or doing something for yourself, doing some exercise. And one of those ways in which you can come home from work feeling more empowered is actually through an acknowledgement practice. So that's what we're going to jump into here today. And I found that, you know, acknowledgement is such a simple thing to do when you know how to do it, and it doesn't take too much to actually do it, but the impact is really powerful. So today we're going to dig into it, and we're going to look at, you know, what is acknowledgement, the impacts of acknowledgement, and to understand how to acknowledge. So first, let's have a look at why it's important. So it's important because if you don't get acknowledgement, you know, there's no positive feedback. And you know, that it just doesn't really work for if you're working away and you're after some feedback to work out if what you're doing is good or bad or right or wrong, or if it's up to the standards, then you don't get that feedback if there's no acknowledgement. You don't have any clarity of, especially when you're younger and you're choosing which path to go down or what actions to take. If there's no acknowledgement from your teachers, from your managers or from your leaders or your chefs, then you feel a little lost. You're not quite sure which way to go. And then that means that you don't feel like you're moving forward because you're lost. You're going, well, which way do I go? You know, am I going backwards? I haven't had any feedback yet. Or if you get negative feedback, you actually feel like you're going backwards. And it can come across as something that you just feel lost, and then you're feeling not connected. When you're going, you know, we're humans. We love to interact with other people. You know, we don't actually like being alone. Sometimes we do, but a lot of the times we actually like being with other people. We enjoy them. And so when we're not getting acknowledged, you know, when we don't feel connected with other people, you can feel alone if you really don't get acknowledged, and you just start looking around going, where's someone that can actually come into agreement with me and talk to me and give me some acknowledgement. You know, I'm a human. I need some love. And if you're not getting acknowledged, you definitely don't feel valued. And that doesn't really work, because at the end of the day, you just don't feel loved. And love is one of the most strongest powers on the universe. Einstein was doing research into it and was trying to create these mathematical formulas for it when he passed away, and he tapped into it. Love is so strong. And I know that when I've built my businesses before and worked with other business owners and work with people and my friends, that when there's love there, things happen with freedom and ease. But when there's not love there, I'm not inspired to be my best around those people. If I am, it might come from a place of right or wrong. I'll show you, mate. But there's a big impact to being that way. But when you're in the kitchen and you're not getting acknowledged at all, maybe there's there's abuse, I'm not inspired to be my best. I know I've seen it happen to other people, and they definitely stop being their best. They don't go out of their way to be their best. They don't go out of their way to do more hours. It's because they love doing it. They love being there. That doesn't happen when there's no acknowledgement around. When there's no acknowledgement, you go home feeling disempowered. You're a little bit lost. You don't have the clarity about whether or not the boss has really valued you. You know you've worked a long, hard day for a certain amount of money, which may not be that much. Most of the time it's not that much. And without even a thank you, like just a simple thank you, you go home feeling disempowered. And if you go home feeling disempowered, you bring that disempowered state into your friendships, your families and your relationships. And they've got to pick you up. There's a ripple effect. Even people when you're going home on the bus or you're walking home, if you're disempowered, you're not smiling at them. You're not making their day better. And at the end of the day, you don't feel like returning to work if there's definitely no acknowledgement there. Not sure why the word home's up there, but anyway. But that's the biggest impact that can happen when there's no acknowledgement. So I'm really interested to know from the panellists, one of these things might have stood out for you more than others, and you would have some examples that you could share for us of how it's been for you. Was it you didn't feel like returning to work? Was it you went home feeling disempowered? Was it you stopped being your best? Was it you didn't feel loved? Was it you didn't feel valued? Was it you felt alone? Was it you didn't feel connected? You didn't feel like you were moving forward? Or you didn't have any clarity? Or it was just that there was no positive feedback? Which was most important for you?
Well, for me, what stands out is the not moving forward. That's something that's just always gives me frustration. If I feel like I'm not moving forward and going in the right direction, or becoming stagnant, or don't have the tools to move forward, it bothers me.
And so then when it bothers you, what happens to you then? Do you want to describe what happens to you when you're in the state of it bothers me?
I guess I could go two different ways. I could take my bag and head home, like that little image, or critically just take a deep breath and just try to work out how to get out of that mudslide thing, and to get over the hump and to keep going. And ironically, I've always moved forward, but it does frustrate me when I have those little hiccups along the path. Yeah. But I get through them, and it's usually because I call on a friend or a family member. I reach out and get help, get advice or whatever. Yeah.
Great. And I really picked up there how you've experienced that mudslide before. And it's like that snowball that keeps getting larger and larger margin, those emotions, just those negative emotions get bigger and bigger and bigger. Was that what it was like for you in that kind of mudslide previously?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I feel like in the industry, I think, I feel like I'm in it now, like in certain aspects, it's like, hang on, how are we going to, put some gravel in there and get up over it or whatever. But yeah, it is frustrating. It is frustrating because you don't have the answers, and a lot of people you're surrounded with don't either. So it's either an adrenaline rush that gets you all excited, or it's scary. It's like,
When you're in that mudslide and there's that scary adrenaline rush, like you're no good to anyone. You're not even any good to yourself.
Yeah. And that in itself is not a great feeling. So, you don't want to be sitting in that spot for a long time.
No, that's right. And sometimes, in the past, I've been in that spot, that negative spot, for a long time.
Well,
and
sorry, go ahead.
And I started having relationship bust-ups with friends and girlfriends and business partners, and it just went backwards fast. And I didn't know how to get out of it. And it was only until I did a lot of personal development and professional development that I learned how to actually deal with that really powerfully, so then I could get back to being empowered really quickly.
Well, I think when you have responsibility of staff and also relationships and all of that, I mean, there's lots of responsibility. So you kind of need to want to get on track pretty quickly.
That's right.
I think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah, look, I think that sort of thing can affect all of us at different times. I mean, I've always found that, I think you've also got to be, a little bit self-contained as well. Like, I think you've got to set goals for yourself that even if you don't always get positive enforcement, there are things that you need to achieve for yourself. And I think you have to be kind to yourself as well, and realize that, not everything's always going to be perfect. And sometimes, you strive for things and they might not happen. But I think it's the actual doing, it's the trying, it's the being positive that you've got to get yourself, motivated. But it certainly does help when you do get recognised for what you do. And, just someone saying, oh, that was really great, or that was a great job. Thanks for putting that effort in. It does mean a lot. And I've had a lot of people that I work for say that really means a lot to them when they hear that stuff. But all of us, sometimes you get bogged down with things like, costings and, trying to work out how you can do what you want to do, but tick all the boxes as well, and look after hours and look after staff and look after everyone, but still make the job happen under the certain pressures. And there's always a sort of a balance there, isn't there? It's never easy.
I think also sort of being aware that, whilst you are working in a sort of a tough environment, or, and there isn't always that acknowledgement, not constantly, but, you also need to be aware, as you said, Peter, that you do set yourself goals, but, people don't own your experience. You go into a place to gain experience, whether you're working for Peter or any place, and people get to lease that in a way. This is what I say. People lease that experience, lease that time that they have with you, and then you take all of that experience and you take it somewhere else and you do it all again, and then you get all of that. And that's quite powerful, because as you go along through your career, you're taking almost your own repertoire from out of each kitchen, and that sort of creates who you are, and you get to keep it all. It's all yours.
Yeah,
Peter Peter doesn't get to keep that. I mean, he'd probably like to, and I would too. But you get to take it to the next place. You get to take it to the next place. You need to be aware that that is yours. It's not anybody else's. That's important. I think the other thing that I find that's really important in terms of acknowledging people is just this daily acknowledgement of you as a group. I mean, it's fine to have that one-on-one situation where you are saying, hey, look, you had a great night cooking tonight. Awesome. All the cuisance on the beef and lamb and what have you were just a really, really good, great technique. But also as a group, you need to bring your team together. And, you know, me being a sort of a pretty big football fan or soccer fan, you know, I sort of almost use that example that when you're going into these services, which are big services, you know, we do some huge numbers in terms of 300 pluses. You need to have everybody's mind focused. And to do that, they need to be in a positive frame of mind. You need to have them ready to go and to be able to do their job really properly. And you need them in a really strong place. And so from that point of view, you know, you're going around and you're making sure that everybody's in a good place. And at the end of the night, if people have done a great job, which invariably they have, you go around and you sort of thank them for their time, you congratulate them, you tell them they've got a good job, they've done well. But if there is a negative thing, it's a conversation done off to the side, or it might be that the section hasn't done as well as you would have expected, and that's, hey guys, you can do this better, we're better than this, or whatever the scenario is. It's not this, you know, really downtrodden.
I think it's really important to do that in a positive way rather than a negative way. But it is part of life. I mean, failure is part of life. Not getting things right is part of life, and you actually learn from it. And you shouldn't be scared of it either, you know. So it's. I think sometimes your mistakes are what make you stronger, what teaches you bigger lessons as well. So I think you got to try as much as possible to value yourself and keep a positive attitude and realize that none of us are perfect. You know, we really aren't.
Yeah. What you were saying, Peter, about, you know, being kind to yourself and what you were saying, James, about appreciating and recognizing your team, you know, it works both ways. You give acknowledgement and you appreciate your team around you, but it's also really important to just appreciate and, you know, look after yourself so that you can look after your team. You know, it does work both ways. And I think sometimes I'll speak for myself, sometimes you get lost in that because you are looking after everyone else. But if you're leading the pack, you must look after yourself and recognize your own, you know, acknowledge yourself for what you're doing.
True.
I just picked up on a couple of things, which I'll just introduce as a new perspective. One of them, Peter, and I've heard it a lot from everyone, is people saying, oh, we're not perfect. And just try this on, that you are perfect and that everyone is perfect. And what I'm pointing to is that you're a perfect human being. And human beings, we're designed to be meaning-making machines. You'll make a meaning out of the word plate. You'll make a meaning out of the word kangaroo. You'll make a meaning out of the word meaning. For example, if I say the word kangaroo to a farmer who's out west and he's had kangaroos raid his crops, he'll have these negative meanings out of you, like, damn kangaroos, they're horrible, I hate bloody things. But whereas if you say the kangaroo to a Japanese person that's never been to Australia, they'll be like, oh my God, they're amazing, I can't wait to see one. But it's the same word. So we're meaning-making machines, and we're actually perfect human beings, and we're perfect by design, and we actually make meaning out of everything. And that's one of the biggest shifts that we start seeing in people is by saying, look, you are perfect, and all the experiences that you're having are totally normal. So let's deal with them. There's nothing wrong with you. Because it's in language when people start thinking of themselves as being wrong, or someone tells them that they're wrong, that we step into righteousness. I'm right, you're wrong. And it's a dominating kind of position to take. Whereas if there's nothing wrong, I'm here to support you. You can say whatever you want and we're going to work through this with you, is a very neutral place to stand. Because when people start making themselves wrong, I'm wrong for doing that, I'm such an idiot, I'm such a fool, that then that's negative self-talk. And that's when people start using other substances, or they start self-harming to deal, especially if they've told themselves enough times about how bad they are, or how wrong they are, or how stupid they are, or how unlovable they are. So it's one of the big shifts that we pull in for people in the white jacket effect, is say, hey, just consider that you are perfect. You're a perfect human being that's going to make meaning out of everything. And yes, some things that you do won't be at the standard that's required, or it's not workable. And that's the learning, is to learn about how to approach the situation, or to learn about what standard is required. So I'm going to jump into, we've talked about, not actually, what happens when there's a missing of acknowledgement. So let's have a look at what we want. We want to feel progress. And I'm interested to know, why would this be important, to feel progress?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty clear thing, is that you go somewhere to gain experience in terms of the culinary world. You want to work through all sections of the kitchen. You want to develop your skills. You want to develop your ability to, improve your career and get to a position where you can potentially, run your own kitchen one day. You also want to be, mentally challenged and also physically challenged from a skill set point of view. And you want to see that movement going on, but that's also important for the kitchen as well. It's important for the kitchen to see that movement happening from, if you're a staff member in amongst a brigade and you're seeing someone regularly move in between sections and you're seeing that development happening, it makes you think, oh, well, if I work hard here, and if I bed this down, then I'm going to move there, sooner rather than later. And you see that energy happening throughout the kitchen. And to me, that's a really amazing thing. That's a whole modus operandi, is that, and quite sort of, from a very selfish point of view, as a manager, you want to have a lot of flexibility in your kitchen. You want to be able to send people away on holidays. You want to be able to deal with a sick day. You want to be able to have all those sort of situations. But at the same time, when people can see that their development is really being well regarded and that the kitchen enables them to move through and develop, you get far less people moving out of the kitchen. People want to stay. They'll work through the entire kitchen to get that whole experience, because then they understand something from the moment a guest walks in, and they might have something at the bar or an amber's bush or all the way through to that last sort of petit four that they have, and then off they go. And so that sort of totality that you're trying to give over to someone from a restaurant, they all kind of work really beautifully together. And it's easy to say, well, you really want to take care of that person's development from a mental and a sustainable point of view for that person. And you do, you do, absolutely. But it's a two-way street, in that it enables you as a manager to have a much better situation to be able to manage. And that gives you a lot more flexibility and enables you to do all those things as well. So it's a win-win positive sort of situation to really invest in with your staff, and to do it in a really genuine way for them and also for you, in my opinion.
Let's go, James. I actually want to come and work with you.
I want you. I need you. I need a beer net though. That's all
Yeah, it falls out. It's actually because I've lost hair on my. There's so much stress when I was younger. I lost a lot of hair on my head. But yeah, so it does fall out. It gets a little bit embarrassing around my desk, but anyway. And tying into that, as you're talking about progress and people moving around, when we've got great acknowledgement, people feel connected. And I'm interested to know if anyone's got a story about why that would be important as well, to feel connected.
Yeah, I think that one of the great things about really working in a kitchen is that we are all connected. You rely on everyone to get the job done, and that sense of teamwork and accomplishment is pretty empowering. So, when you have a great service or when, just getting through the day and working together and knowing that, every little tiny part of the mechanism is so important that it all works together to actually give the diners an incredible experience. That's what we're there for. We're there to give people positive, great experiences. And when you're part of that and you feel part of it, it's pretty empowering.
And does it make the whole operation seem to happen a whole lot easier when everyone's connected?
Of course. Yeah, it really does. Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, great.
I think that word connection is also, it's connected to, excuse the pun, but I think it's connected to that ownership as well. If you're connected to something, you have an ownership to it. And I think, that really makes that difference. And, if you're seriously invested into a business and you understand all the nuances of it, you're really part of that family and you're part of the business, and it kind of you become even more important to the group, and you become more connected to the front of house as well. When you've spent time in a place and you understand all those little nuances, you become not just that kitchen, you become the sort of the sum of the whole. The administration knows you, the front of house person knows you, the bartender knows you. All of that sort of stuff is really quite and that takes time, to develop that. But that's a really lovely place when you get there.
I'm sort of interested to ask Sam. There's a lot of great working places out there, and places like our restaurants are working at a really high level, and when you do that, the sense of accomplishment is quite high. But there are so many different areas in this industry where maybe the output isn't as appreciated as much. Maybe you're working in a club or something where it seems more impersonal, and you're working, you're working your ass off. You're still working hard, but maybe you just, maybe not being fulfilled with what you're learning. What do you say to those people? How do you motivate those people, and how do they motivate themselves?
It's amazing. We're, as human beings, we're incredible. We are phenomenal creatures on this planet. And you could do something that lands you in jail, and when you're in jail, you can still find that you can actually be in a place of peace. And you can still have laughter in jail. You can still be connected to other people in jail. But at that point in time, you may not have a choice to leave jail if you've been in prison for life. But while you're in there, you still have choices to make. You have choices as to who you listen to and who you speak to, and also what you say to those people. Because we're all living in the now. We're all living right now. The past was 2 seconds ago. But we're all living right now. And when you live in the now, as I said, you've got all those different perspectives, that a number of different perspectives as there are sands of grain on the beach, and you can start finding things that you find are beautiful. The simple analogy is there's two sides to every hand. There's the silver lining to every cloud. So even if you are taking out the trash, you might think of Oscar the Grouch on Sesame Street and start acting like Oscar the Grouch. Maybe even, well, I won't suggest jumping in the bin and putting the lid on top and jumping out when people walk past you, but you could have some fun with it. And it all depends on you to choose how to have fun in any situation. Now, if you're in that situation because you're trying to get yourself out of debt, or you're trying to save up some money to get to the next spot, or you're trying to work your way up the chain and get recognised in a bar or a restaurant, you might need to start at that very bottom, but at least you're in, and you need to be recognised. And if you do your job well, you'll be recognised. But if you find that it's really not, you don't have a vision for yourself of actually working your way through to moving up through the chain, and you're very disempowered in that position that you're doing, then I suggest you have a look at other ways, other things that will fulfill you. Because if you're disempowered, there's going to be a ripple effect around you. You're going to be disempowering other people. You're not going to be empowering other people. What I do in my life, everyone that I communicate with, except for my girlfriend when I have an argument with her, is I'm trying to empower them. And I'll catch myself if I'm disempowering people. I'm trying to leave people in a better position, feeling more empowered after they talk with me. And it has then the next person they go and talk to, because they're now feeling more powerful and more happy, they'll pass that on to them. So if you're not empowered in whatever role you're doing, I suggest having a look at finding another one. Start talking to people about what they feel might be good for you. Have some courageous steps and start taking some actions and doing some research on what might be good for you.
Cool.
Does that help, Peter?
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking there might be a lot of people out there watching this that maybe aren't in, the best situation. Maybe they don't have a workplace that does acknowledge them. So I'm just asking, what sort of skills do people need to motivate themselves or to find that sort of positiveness? If it's not around them, they're not lucky enough to be in that situation. What do they need to do, and how do they need to act, and do they need to go looking for that situation and remain positive themselves? I'm just asking the question, really.
I think
no, thank you for
course comes in so handy, because it is a tool that you guys have created that applies to all levels of chefs at every stage of their career. I think there's takeaways in this program that if more people knew it existed, could go and that guy that might not be getting acknowledged, he might be able to find tools to combat it or understand it better.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think this is really great, because I think it is a good resource for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tawnya. And it's not a course for people that think there's something wrong with them. You can do it.
Yeah, I didn't start for this.
Yeah, it's actually for people that are actually empowered and for they're actually moving somewhere. And if you think there's nothing wrong with you, that's fine. Wait until you get in the course, and then we'll show you some things that aren't working for you, that are having a big impact on your life, because everyone's got blind spots. You know what you know. You know what you don't know. But you don't know what you don't know. And that's what we give you access to. And when I started getting access to this type of stuff, I had 19 days in a row where I had the feeling go through my body and the thoughts go through my head that I was having the best day of my life. And I had it 19 days in a row. And that's what's possible when you start getting access to stepping out of I'm right, you're wrong, understanding integrity, understanding the difference between what really happened and the story that you made up about something in your head, and how to acknowledge people. And there's a whole, and how to actually clean up after you've had a breakdown, from moving from disempowered to being empowered. So one thing that I'll just step into really quickly, just to address what Peter said, was that, you know, if you find that you're not getting empowered, you can start to cause not getting acknowledged. You could actually cause acknowledgement in the place that you're working for. You could start acknowledging people. And we're going to step into that quite quickly after this. So just noticing the time, where we've got 23 minutes left. So I'm just going to step through a few slides a bit quicker to get us into where some solutions are. So you want to feel consistently great, and you want to feel valued. You know, you want to feel inspired, and so that you can reach for the moon and the stars. You want to feel loved. You want to be generous when you're giving acknowledgement. You want to be generous to other people. And you want to feel seen for who you really are. You know, that someone's actually seen how valuable you are. And that's the power of acknowledgement, is that you allow people to feel like they've been seen for who they really are. And everyone is unique. Everyone has something beautiful to offer this planet. So I'm interested to know, which was the most relevant for you out of the panelists? You know, was it you want to make people feel seen for who they really are, or you love being seen for who you are, being generous, feeling loved, feeling inspired, feeling valued, feeling consistently great, feeling connected, or feeling progress?
I think for me, it's connected, progress, and being inspired for myself and inspiring the team around me. My chefs that I work with, I mean, I manage them from Zoom half the time, which is just amazing. But to me, being inspired as a chef and as a human, and also inspiring the people around me, and yeah, that to me really resonates, as well as the other things. But yeah, I think it's really important that we keep that inspiration happening, you know?
Yeah, I sort of think the idea that you can actually create that acknowledgement by acknowledging others. You know, and I think that, you know, sort of that idea of paying it forward, I think by doing something positive like that, you know, it comes back to you, you know, and I think that's, you know, if you can make people feel valued, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, it's sort of valuing and / acknowledgement. I mean, I sort of talked about there was a question that sort of came up on the feed, but it was, you know, it relates to sort of, if you're valuing people, you're able to sort of get to know who they are over a longer period of time. And you can, if you have someone in your kitchen for a longer period of time, then you can create more value for them in their skill set. And they, as I said, you know, they learn the sort of totality of what you do, and that creates, you know, and during that period of time that you've got them, if you're continually acknowledging them, whether that's just saying, hey, you've done a great job tonight, or acknowledging them by moving them through a section and that recognition that they're progressing from an actual physical point of view, I mean, I think that's really key. And so if you can help create a CV for someone that essentially has that sort of, you know, huge blocks of time where someone stays within a business and learns it all, that creates value. And it also, you know, during that time that you've got them, you acknowledge them on all the different levels, then, you know, that's a hugely powerful thing for someone, I think. And it's sort of, you know, it creates a professionalism that you know, I don't, that I think is really key.
Yeah. That really reminds me about being a business owner, and when I empower my staff, I feel great.
Yeah.
I see them start to rise. I was like, wow, you know, I really helped someone else flourish and be their best.
I've got to say, I drive down to Kirrawee, which is an hour and a half or 3 hours a day round trip. I just zoom right into the kitchen. I mean, it's empowering to let them, you know, they just put me on the screen and I sit and then I'll go, what's that? What's that? But, you know, it's, they've just risen to the challenge in a big way. And it's, yeah, it is. It's great to be part of that.
Wonderful. So let's step into some different techniques about how to do it. I think those people that haven't been acknowledged for a long time, start taking notes and take these into your workplace, drop them on the boss's desk and have a bit of a conversation with them. Look people in the eye when you acknowledge them. Look them fair and square in the eyes. And they'll know that you're meaning exactly those words that you're saying to them. You know, you're speaking from the heart. You need to feel the words as you say them. And make sure that they land with the person. Yes, you can acknowledge the obvious things. It's quite easy to acknowledge the obvious things. There'll be some really big things that stand out about that person that you can acknowledge. One unique thing is actually to acknowledge things that people are working on improving. They may be at level 0.1. Acknowledge them for getting there. It might have actually been a real struggle for them to get there. Or they might have had to move hell and high water to get to level 0.1. Acknowledge that and you'll start to see them rise faster. They'll get confident with what they're doing. Acknowledge what hasn't been acknowledged. And this takes a little bit of understanding and really watching those people that are working for you, or your friends or your family. You can bring this into your whole life. Acknowledge what's never been acknowledged. Just that uniqueness about that person. I'm interested to know and just check in with everyone and say, why would it be important to acknowledge what hasn't been acknowledged, or acknowledge the things that people are working on improving, or acknowledging the obvious things, or looking people in the eye, or feeling the words as you say them? Why would any of those be important?
I think it's important to be genuine in what you do. And that's going to, I think that's reasonably obvious when you're not genuine. So looking someone in the eye and being genuine, it really gives someone a sense that you actually, are believing what you're saying, and that you are actually acknowledging them on a real level.
Yeah.
And it's a real human level. It's a real level of, I value you. I want to be connected to you.
I think sometimes what's really important as a manager as well with people is that, sometimes people want to have they want to have a really frank conversation with you about, something in particular that concerns them at work. And sometimes if you don't have that time at that moment, you need to sort of say, well, okay, look, let's have this conversation, this afternoon at whatever time, or can we schedule an appointment, tomorrow, where I can give you half an hour or an hour of my time, whatever you think is necessary for us to sort of really have a good conversation about, your time with me and all that kind of stuff, so that, you can say, look, the conversation we're going to have, it's not a drive-by. It's a serious conversation about where you're at with the business and what you want to achieve and what might be next, or whatever the scenario is. And then that gives you enough time to really consider that individual and where they might be within the spectrum of your business.
That would be value, wouldn't it, James? Wouldn't that be valuing? Placing a value on that request, or placing a versus a flyby.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes you don't have that time, and sometimes you have to realise, and I think people appreciate that when they, you can say, look, this is going to require a bit of effort. We need to sit down and have a good chat about stuff, and and that's important, I think, just as much as to sort of, make a scheduled time for people, because, I mean, you are busy, people are busy, and you just need that time to really consider. And I find actually having time to consider anything, but let alone conversation about an individual, you need to really think it out. And that's important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's, when we acknowledge, if we are really busy, we could let people know, hey, look, I'm really busy. I'm just going to quickly acknowledge you for this. And then you just have to acknowledge them just quite quickly. And then if we want to really connect with someone at a much deeper level, we can say, look, I'm going to schedule in some time with you in the future. We're going to book it in. We're going to spend an hour together. We're going to have a chat about this. And that's when more of the value can be communicated. And as you were talking there, James, it really, the thought came to my mind about how when people are acknowledged, and they're consistently acknowledged, they feel safe to communicate what's really on their mind. They're like, oh, it's actually quite safe to communicate with James or with Peter or with Sam or with Tawnya about what's really going on. And as a business owner, that is incredibly valuable, because your staff will tell you what's not working. You're so busy with so many other things that you can't see where all the gaps are and where things aren't working, where a potential breakdown might happen. And the staff have got incredible perspectives, and they see it from the ground up. They'll see what's not working.
I think often what happens as well is that, it's important also to recognise that sometimes, while you can have really good relationships with all of your staff, sometimes, your relationship with one person may not be as close as, say, your sous chef. And I have a number of sous chefs, and some people feel far more able to connect to another person within the business whose confidentiality will always be with me. So it might be that it's one of my female chefs would prefer to talk with one of my female senior chefs, of which I have two or three. And so you have that sort of dynamic that happens. And sometimes it might be a younger kid who feels more inclined to feel a bit more of a connection to one of my other sous chefs. And sometimes it's directly to me. So I think if you create a really good management team that's able to get into all of the different people, or is able to connect to all the different pieces in your puzzle, then that's important as well. I mean, it's not just you. If you're this beacon of acknowledgement or whatever.
Yeah, you're right.
It's pretty hard.
You got to create a culture of that type of feeling that people can go to other people than you as well in your management team. And it's and personalities and people working with each and other is one of the hardest things that I think we have to deal with, is how do we all work together as a team. And there's always going to be some personality problems with different people that you have to negotiate and work through. And it's not an easy thing. That's, I think, one of the hardest things of the job is actually people and working within that sort of structure of a high pressured sort of kitchen, and how does everyone react to it, everyone else, and I think that ultimately all you can do is create a positive environment where people do feel they can come and talk, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Well said, Peter.
Thanks.
So when we acknowledge, really go above and beyond. You know, you can create time. If you don't have the time now, create time in the future for you to go above and beyond when you acknowledge people. And you really need to acknowledge yourself first. You know, if my cup's not full, I can't share with other people. So I have to love myself. And when I'm loving my life and what I'm doing, it's so easy for me to love other people and share it. So first thing you can do is, you know, you can think about the things that you'd like to acknowledge yourself for, or you can write a list. And just start writing the list down, the things that you would like to be acknowledged for. And you can ask for acknowledgement. You know, you can put a request in and say, hey, James, I'd love to be acknowledged for this. It's actually it's kind of a bit cheeky to do that, but it creates a bit of banter, creates a bit of fun. You know, we're all out to have a bit of fun, have a bit of a laugh, and we want to make our lives easier because our lives could be quite hard. And so we can ask for acknowledgement. And actually, I'll just go back. And when you ask for acknowledgement, you know, just choose who and by when. You know, that's all in line with taking action. You need to choose by when. Now, when someone acknowledges you, you have to stop and you have to stand there. And it feels like, sometimes when you start doing it, you can feel like a bit of an idiot. But if you move that to the side, just stop and take it in. It's not egotistical to listen to someone else when they acknowledge you. They're acknowledging you for who you are. And there's a big gap, is what I see, between where they're at and where people know who they really are on the inside. And I'm seeing a big gap between people. And I immediately see it when I start acknowledging people. I'll get halfway through an acknowledgement and they'll be like, oh yeah, it's all fine. And they'll run away. I'm like, hang on a minute. They can't even be with positive words about themselves. Nothing wrong with that. There's a big culture here in Australia around the tall poppy sort of syndrome. I can't think of myself as someone that's valuable and is creative and inspiring and loving of others and caring. And I've got big visions and I'm going for them. You know, the culture in Australia kind of squashes that a bit. And we're here to break that apart. You can also write a list of what you can acknowledge other people for. You know, if you haven't acknowledged someone for a while, or you know, it can be team members. If you're a boss, you can acknowledge other people, your staff and your team and your crew, or even your other family members or friends. You know, find out, just have a think about what you can acknowledge them for. But also add when you're going to acknowledge them. There's no point writing it down or thinking about it and not taking any action on it. You need to take action on these things. You can also ask other people what they would like to be acknowledged for. And just hand out a piece of paper and say, let me know what you'd like to be acknowledged for. You know, it's a beautiful thing. And sometimes the most amazing things come up. And you need to make sure you're listening. You listen, when they say, I want to be acknowledged for this, you have to listen to every word. And you acknowledge them word for word for what they want to be acknowledged for.
Excuse me, Sam, I think that's a really good, I'm going to do that with my team tomorrow. I'm actually going to send them an email and ask them to give me a list. And I'm really curious what they'll say. Yeah.
See how you're starting to tap into, like, now you're in this world of, oh, wow, what could happen here? And it's a really positive possibility, something new. And I just got a feeling then that around that same kind of feeling around how I started to have the best day of my life every day, because I was doing something new. It's that world of inquiry. Now, I get we've only got 4 minutes left before we all have to run. You know, people are busy. And some people like to be acknowledged by words or in public, in front of other people. Or they might just like a gift. Or they might like a pat on the back. So ask them how they would like to be acknowledged. And it's great for doing team incentive at the start of the week, you know, getting clear on that. So when you've got goals and everyone achieves the goals, they get gifts or a pat on the back or big public acknowledgement. Everyone's different. So everyone that's on this call, you've all learned different options around how to acknowledge people, about even listening for acknowledgement as well, what the impacts are of not acknowledging people and how powerful acknowledgement is. So I'm a demand that you all, when this call's over, you give 3 huge acknowledgements to 3 people. Try it with people that you don't like. I'm a big fan of jumping in the deep end and give them an acknowledgement. Drop any past point of view that you might have and give them acknowledgement, and you'll be amazed at what happens there. Now, make it a regular practice at the end of the day. You know, it might be at the week, but make it a regular practice. So then it just becomes commonplace and people start doing it. And then they start, all those positive things that we talked about, they just start happening automatically. Now, what I learned in the army is that you're only as good as your slowest man. You're only as good as your slowest man. You're only as good as your worst customer, as your unhappiest customer. You're only as good as your unhappiest staff member. That's where your standard is actually at. And I demand that we all start lifting that bar. And when we put in something like acknowledgement, we find that lifts. Everyone is doing their best. Everyone on the planet is doing their best. Because we all just want to be loved. That's it. We all just want to be loved. Now, it's 5:28. For all those people that are putting questions into the chat, thank you. We don't have time to get to them, but what we'll do is we'll take a list of them, we'll start answering them on the Facebook page. Please get into the Facebook page and we'll start answering them in there. Thank you. We appreciate your comments. And now's the time to acknowledge.
Can I just acknowledge one thing before we all flitter off into the world? I just want to really acknowledge Richard Moiser, who is the reason why White Jacket Effect exists today, and to acknowledge Amber for bringing him his, to keeping his life, alive, really. For you guys who have watched this, thank you. Richard was an inspirational human being in my life, and Amber's and a whole lot of other people. And I just think, the positive effect he had on so many people's, careers within hospitality is immense. And the things that are being said here today, and the job that Amber's doing to sort of, change the perspective of our industry and to, make his death a really positive one is awesome and amazing. So,
yeah, I second that. Well done, Amber. Fantastic.
Yeah, Amber.
I agree.
Thank you very much. I really got that from you, James, and thank you, Peter, and thank you, Tawnya. And I would like to thank Sam for helping me along this journey. I'm really looking forward to seeing where it takes us all.
Very good.
Thank you. I got that. Now, the White Jacket Effect, we've started creating our acknowledgement for industry. And feel free to take a photo of that. We're working on that. If you've got a better version, please let us know. If you can see something there that we could add to it, we really acknowledge people. Everyone, everyone puts in such long hours for little pay, sometimes very little acknowledgement, and you keep going. It's incredible. So we acknowledge all of you. You've taken time out of your day to come onto this call and to hear us speak. I mean, you're all up to stuff. So I really acknowledge everyone for taking time out and for contributing here. Thank you very much. Now.